So, to set the scene, we begin with hate crime in review, a short reflection on where we stand and what's ahead in Northern Ireland. And I'd really like to welcome Professor Kevin Brown, who worked with Judge Marrinan on his review of hate crime legislation, those 34 recommendations he made 5 years ago. So without further ado, Kevin Brown from Queen's University. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, good afternoon. It's a privilege to be joining you here today for what is a very important and timely subject. I'm here as an academic lawyer and as a member of the Hate Crime Review to talk about, give a brief overview of the legal reforms that we're expecting to have sight of, hopefully in November. But even in talking about law, we must always remember the context in which we're discussing law reform. Our speakers have already touched a little bit on this, but I thought for me this slide that I produced encapsulates the problems that we're dealing with. And this is just a few media posts, local, national and international media, and the accompanying photographs, identifying clearly the problem that Northern Ireland currently has with hate. You can see there, I think that line from Amnesty International just from August there, a year of hate and fear with racist crimes hitting a record high. But you can see we've attracted attention, and rightly so, because of how awful things have been as far as field as the New York Times there as well. And hate crime does significant harm, obviously, to individuals, to communities, to neighborhoods, to property, also damages trust within relationships, trust between individuals and communities, and the criminal justice system. And part of responding to that will be legal reform. As well as the examples I've given there from the media, I thought useful to put up there just briefly, again, to provide further context to the law reform, recent PSNI hate incidents and hate crime statistics. Obviously, these are only recorded, so there'll be many incidents and offences that the individuals might, for different reasons, choose not to report. So this is really the tip of the iceberg, and the PSNI break it down by different characteristics, as you can see on the slide, and look at the increase in racist hate incidents and hate crime from 2024 to 2025. It's shocking, and that it's the racist hate crime has dominated the media, understandably given the statistics, but we don't forget about the other characteristics either. So why is reform of hate crime legislation needed? Well, Northern Ireland does have hate crime legislative framework, but it's outdated and it's partial. It relies on sentencing enhancement provisions rather than standalone offences. What does that mean? How do we, in terms of kind of breaking that down? Well, it means that officially or formally, it's only when the judge comes to sentence that the hate motivation is taken into consideration, where it might be seen as an aggravating factor and may increase the sentence. If, for example, it's proven motivation based on race, for example, maybe the underlying offence being criminal damage. That's different from our neighbours in the Republic of Ireland and Scotland, and to an extent England and Wales, where they have standalone offences, where the hate element becomes part of the charge and also part of the conviction, if proven, obviously. The sentencing enhancement provisions have come in for a lot of criticism because victims complain, and rightly so, that you don't see hate. Hate becomes invisible. Not only is it not on the criminal record or on the charge, it's because of that, it's often lost as cases journey through the criminal justice system because it's not formally part of it. It's not saying the PSNI don't gather data or record it, or the prosecution service, but because we don't have standalone charges, that's often the risk of that being dropped off or missed and treated in an inconsistent way is significant. there's other gaps or problems within the justice system as well, and in relation to response to hate. There's a lack of protection for some groups, transgender identity, gender, age, not currently protected, often seen as protected characteristics in other jurisdictions. There's a lack of adequate coverage of the long-standing problem that we have in Northern Ireland with sectarianism. There's a narrow legal test in terms of proving motivation, proving that hostility element, and there's outdated public order and stirring up of hatred offences. And all of this leads to limited data and inconsistent recording of hate. Now, Judge Merriam's review that reported in 2020, so 5 years ago now, provided a clear blueprint about recommending a single comprehensive hate crime bill, would introduce these aggravated offences, would have new protected characteristics alongside the existing ones, new public order and stirring up offences, and stronger recognition of victim support, reporting, and community impact. So where are we now, 5 years later, 5 years after we reported? Well, the Department of Justice is preparing legislative reforms. It's expected later this autumn, probably next month. The most recent update I heard is next month. This will not, from my understanding, take the form of a hate crime bill, but will instead, some of the provisions, not all of Judge Merriam's provisions, but some will be included within a wider sentencing bill that's also dealing with other issues. The reforms are indeed expected to replace the current sentencing enhancement model with the aggravated offences model, and I think that is to be welcomed. So it'll be reflected on the charge and the conviction. There's going to be an update and an expansion of the protected characteristics. And we obviously know what Judge Merriam recommended. Will the Department of Justice include all of those protected characteristics? Will they include them in the way that Judge Merriam had suggested? Time will ultimately tell when we see the bill. Scotland, for example, decided not to include gender in its recent hate crime legislation. They thought a better way was to go down having a misogyny aggravator, a misogyny offence. So that's something to look out for. Scotland included age in its reforms. The Republic of Ireland didn't include age in its reforms. Judge Merriam suggested that we should. And it looks, from what I've read from the DOJ so far, it's not likely to include sectarianism. It's also unlikely to adopt the wider threshold recommended by Judge Merriam for establishing hate, but we could be proven wrong, but it seems unlikely. And the hate speech provisions, as opposed to the hate crime provisions, it seems that the next legislative mandate is where we'll see the hate speech provisions, as opposed to in this one. What's at stake for victims through these reforms? For victims, legal reform does matter. It doesn't solve everything, but it's important. It signifies that as a polity, as a criminal justice system, that we take prejudice or hostility-based harm seriously. It should hopefully ultimately lead to strengthening trust between marginalised communities and the criminal justice system, and indeed our political system as well. And hopefully those problems of consistency and data recording will be rectified to, or at least reduced as a problem. And the idea is it will make hate visible by moving to this new system. But legislation alone is not enough, and I don't need to tell you here today with the expertise that you have. It needs to be accompanied by training, engagement with communities on a regular basis, and support for reporting. How do we encourage people to report incidents, particularly if they haven't had faith or a good experience in the system in the past, which has cost them faith and trust in the system? That's why it's so important, and that's why I really wanted to be part of today, to support the work of Victim Support NI and the Hate Crime Advocacy Service. So, in conclusion, hate crime reform should not be viewed simply as a technical legal fix. It's part of how we as a society reflect our values, that we promote inclusive justice, and post-conflict as well. It's important in terms of moving forward to be a better, more equal society. And diversity has grown in Northern Ireland in recent years, in recent decades. That's really a positive thing. We need to acknowledge that, and our law needs to evolve to reflect that. The forthcoming sentencing bill is an opportunity to commence, because it won't implement all of the changes, but to commence the process of creating a coherent rights-based framework, embedding education and prevention alongside prosecution, because the criminal justice system is not the only solution, and recognizing hate as hate, making hate visible through the reforms. So I want you to hopefully enjoy your day, take part in the debates. I look forward to chatting with you throughout the day. And also, please, I mean, given the audience I'm talking to, it's probably don't need to say this, but stay engaged. When the legislation comes out, the draft legislation, there may well be debates about what characteristics are protected or not protected, what the legal test for hate is. And by staying engaged, responding to your, communicating with your MLAs about the views of your organizations or as individuals, you can make a real difference. So thank you very much.